All right. Hello, everyone. Namaste and welcome to a special episode of Growth Fit interview series brought to you by CustomFit.ai. My name is Nishtala Agnihotri and I'm a story scientist at CustomFit.ai. CustomFit.ai is a personalization engine designed to help B2B companies convert their website traffic into quality leads by dynamically being able to change website content, CTAs, images based on the user persona and their past behavior. It's a completely no-code platform for marketers with an intuitive interface that enables B2B marketers, conversion rate optimizers, ABM leads to create hyper-personalized experiences that can lift conversions. And let me introduce today's guest, Alex Price. The reason why I said it's a special episode because Alex represents an agency, a marketing agency, and this is our first episode with a marketing agency. So let me tell a little bit about Alex. He's extremely passionate about partnering with ambitious marketers and empowering them for success. And he was included in the BIMA 100 of the people shaping the future of the digital industry, and he was also named by the famous Drum, as their agency rising star of 2016. What really caught my attention was that Alex started freelancing when he was 16 and founded his digital agency in his bedroom. So, Alex, my first question right away is, what's been your journey that brought you to lead 93 Digital, and it moved from your bedroom to an entire agency? And how did you end up in the B2B sector? Tell us a little bit of details around that.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, first of all. It's good to be talking, and for the introduction too, it's very generous. I'm trying to think where the best place to start is, because if I start at age 16 and tell you everything, we might be here for hours, but I'll pick out a few of probably the most important parts. When I was 16, I'd been starting to do bits of web development and freelance design and some SEO and all kinds of digital marketing type stuff. And as that progressed, I started working basically through platforms like, at the time it was called Elance, but I think it's now Upwork and People Per Hour and all of those kind of freelance job sites. So someone would post on there and say, I need someone to make some small changes to my website or some help with some SEO and type of response. And I somehow very quickly began to gain some traction there. I was kind of learning on the job, I think it's fair to say. I didn't have much experience, but I'd been kind of always interested in computers. And I think for me, the driver was always independence. For whatever reason, I've always really valued my independence and wanted to work for myself, and even from a young age wanted to feel independent in that respect. So it was great. It was an exciting start to what's turned into something that I couldn't have predicted now. But it's been a great journey. So I guess the freelancing carried on into my early 20s. I started at university here in London at King's College. I ended up dropping out of university just because the freelance business was gathering speed and was going well, and I felt like I reached a bit of a crossroads as to, do I keep studying and limit my business, or do I leave and just invest all of my time and energy into the business? And I chose the second one, and I didn't really look back. It was quite quickly things just started to gather more momentum. We opened a small office. We hired the first employees in 2015, and really from there have grown just kind of organically to where we are now, which is a team of about 30 people, all kind of mainly based in London, and working across a lot of UX design and development work in terms of websites, but also some digital marketing in terms of SEO and paid. So we've kind of got two teams, 93 Digital and 93X, doing kind of two slightly different disciplines. But as you said, the B2B sector is where we tend to focus, specifically B2B technology, software, SaaS, and some kind of wider B2B services. I think we ended up I think in the agency world, one case study often leads to another. So to begin with, it wasn't a kind of purposeful decision, but over the last few years has been a very, very clear focus for us. We love working with clients in the sector. We generally feel like we connect with them very well. We see eye to eye. We have, I think, similar cultures, which I think for agencies and clients working together is very important. There's a certain kind of momentum and pace that the marketing teams that we work with have, which is exciting. There's a lot of investment and progression in the B2B tech sector generally. So it's a very exciting space in which we operate with a huge number of companies doing interesting things. So that kind of covers everything from like fintech to HR tech to basically pick a word and put it in front of tech, and there's a subcategory in the B2B space. But we really like the kind of enterprise B2B space where customer journeys are quite lengthy and sales journeys are quite considered and complicated, and how do we use digital channels and user experience and websites to kind of support that. And obviously in the last year, 18 months, with everything that's been happening with COVID, that's become even more relevant in that lots of B2B marketers have traditionally been very reliant on events and conferences and all of those kind of things for pipeline. And when all of that stopped, I think many of them had to become much more serious about digital channels generally. I speak to marketers all the time that wish they'd started working on SEO 6 months, a year ago, and it takes time to build. It's been exciting. Hopefully that covers off kind of a few of the key milestones.
Sure. Actually, it's really perfect to be in a lucrative spot where you can learn and earn, and I guess you come from there. So I saw that you have a very focused set of service offerings that 93 Digital offers. I'm curious specifically, when you sit down to work with content strategy, conversion pathways, user journey mapping, and so on, what is the process and how deep do you dig to know your customer's customer, which is very typical for an agency?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think particularly for the website projects that we deliver, that level of understanding and insight is really, really key. I mean, it's key across everything that we do, but when we kick off a website project, we always begin with what we refer to as a discovery and definition phase of work. So we split our projects into two, the first being a strategy discovery phase, the next stage being all of the actual designing and developing that happens next. And so that first phase is really the chance to think about analytics and SEO and user journeys and all of the different meetings and workshop formats that we run with clients in order to facilitate the knowledge transfer process, because often that's what it is. It's getting knowledge from within internal teams within our clients, spanning marketing and sales and maybe customer success and more widely within the business, and then cross-referencing that with more qualitative and quantitative data sources, research that we undertake. So looking at analytics and heat mapping and all of those kind of things, but also maybe looking at user research and interviewing customers. And so really we want as much of that as possible. For us, the success of a website project is defined in that very first phase of the project before any design or development happens. And I think that's the big trap that a lot of maybe smaller clients that are not willing to invest enough in a website project, or some agencies fall into, is you have to do a lot of thinking before you get into design. And I think a lot of clients that are earlier stage don't quite understand the value of that work and want to just get straight to, how does it look? We want it to look like this. And I always laugh with the team, because on every brief we get, we have a list of, we like these websites, and we probably see the same 2 or 3 coming up across nearly every brief. Stripe, for example, you probably know stripe.com is the fintech that website gets referenced nearly every time on a brief. But it's a hugely important part of the process. And I always say to clients, like, I think you can have a non-strategic project or a strategic project, i.e. it just needs to look nice and be a shop window, or it needs to deliver marketing outcomes. Like which one is it? Because you can do the first one relatively cheaply and you can just dive in, and in 4 to 6 weeks you can maybe design something with a freelancer. You don't need our team of digital strategists and SEO and other people to be inputting into that type of project. But if you go to an agency and you say we need to increase the number of leads we're generating, increase conversion rates, increase organic search visibility, you need to be investing in the right scope of work early on in the project before you get into the design. So yeah, definitely the most critical part. And we use a number of meetings and workshops in different formats, depending on the scope of the project. Some clients, they have maybe a third-party SEO agency or a content writer, or they've got a few people internally or externally that have done some of the thinking already. Other clients, it's a blank canvas and they want us to help with everything. So yeah, it varies a little bit based on the size and shape and maturity of the client. But either way, that work I think has to be done in order to achieve the outcomes that you want and the results.
That must be a tough job. I can see that coming along. How do you convince them to invest time and money into, and actually faith into, the initial part of strategy? How do you, and it's just coming out of curiosity, right?
Yeah.
Not many clients, either you'll have to sort of have your own criteria of choosing clients and say, I'm not going to work with these people who don't understand strategy. Or you settle down and say, hey, this is why it's important. So do you actually go about going through such tough conversations with them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's part of the qualification process for us. And you're right in that if we don't feel like the client understands or sees the value in that type of work, then it's probably not a good fit for us. And not just from our perspective, like the client can ultimately spend far less money and do something much quicker by not going down that route. So it's not for every type of client. But I think generally the way that we present it and the way that we explain the process of delivering a project like that, clients quite quickly understand and begin to see the value. And I think actually a lot of the work that we do in these discovery strategy phases, the client isn't, even if they're not necessarily expecting it, they're suddenly realizing that it can help lots of other parts of their marketing too. So if we're looking at doing SEO research to feed the website project, well, that SEO research is going to help feed potentially lots of other things as well. So some of the stuff that we do in that discovery phase actually has kind of wider knock-on effects and delivers value that's much more ongoing and not just for the website project. But it can be difficult to kind of to sell occasionally, but we're generally quite clear about if it's not the right fit for the client, then that's okay for both of us overall. Which it can be difficult to turn down business sometimes, but I think ultimately we're driven by making or achieving outcomes. Like we like to see the needle move. Like we like to see in 6 months, a year, to be able to compare and say this is the impact that we've had. And unless we can shape those things, so sometimes we get a brief from a client and they've kind of already sketched the homepage on a napkin with a pen and sent it to us. And for us, if that's already happened, then it's too late for us to have the impact that we would like to have.
True. And I also noticed a service line about multilingual website creation. So when do your customers come to you and say, we need to either extend or probably inherit right from the beginning, invest into multilingual websites? What drives them to do so?
Yeah, so I think particularly within the technology space, there's a lot of tech companies who, and particularly even more in the last 18 months or so, are realizing that they can enter new markets without necessarily having to have any physical presence there. It's possible to make a website multilingual or localize a website so that as far as Google is concerned, that version of the site is relevant for a specific market. And the way that it begins to crawl and index your content, you start to see some benefits in local markets. So it's a really interesting and growing area for us. I think it's an area of specialism. We've done a lot of quite complicated, large multilingual projects. And it's something that's quite easy to get wrong, I think. A lot of clients come to us with multilingual websites that are a bit of a mess and very slow, and the database is not optimized. And so without getting too boring and technical, there's some kind of careful things to get right with a multilingual project. but the ROI can be huge. You can spend thousands, tens of thousands of pounds, maybe making a multilingual website, or adding on multilingual to the website, and suddenly you're starting to generate leads in a market where you weren't even visible at all before. So we've definitely seen more clients thinking that way, and I think any client that's serious about SEO also needs to be serious about at least localization. So even if you have English content, but English for India, English for Australia, English for United States, there's advantages there as well. So not just multilingual, but localization as well.
Yeah, yeah. And so tell us about how B2B overall, from your experience, right? Because you've been so deeply invested into the B2B sector.
Yeah.
How do B2B companies perceive personalization? And because we are a personalization tool ourselves, I'm more curious to understand what is the process of your MarTech consultancy, and I noticed that that's a service line that you have. So how do you bring together, identify the right tech stack and the tools that your specific client needs? So take us through a little bit about that process.
Yeah, so the majority of our clients, and I should say too that we specialize in working with clients that I think are at a minimum kind of in that scale up phase. So it's less common for us to work with kind of early stage startups that are pre-product market fit. For us, they're usually they've got that traction, they've achieved product market fit, if you believe in that kind of term, and they're beginning to scale. So there's usually a degree of maturity already there, and there might be some existing MarTech tools being used. But with a website project or with engaging us at 93X doing digital marketing, often some of those things are being reconsidered, or they're thinking about what tools might need to change. And so depending on the scope of the work that we have with the client, we may have some time to basically guide them through that process, understand what they're looking for help with. We're actually a HubSpot partner as well on the 93X side of the business, so we work quite a lot there. I think personalization itself is a really interesting area. It's one that I think my experience so far has been, it's often kind of on the list of lots of B2B marketers, but it gets knocked down the list of priorities because often B2B marketers are, even in quite big companies, the teams are quite small, they're juggling so many things. And it's the thing that they always want to get to, but they never quite have the time to implement and then actually keep managing as well. Because I think as soon as you start to implement any kind of logic, start writing rules, if this then that type rules with personalizing bits of content, then it needs, you need to be keeping an eye on it and measuring it. So I think you generally need a certain level of resource internally, someone that can kind of own personalization for it to be important. And of course, we're talking about website personalization specifically, right? I think a lot of marketers are thinking about CRM, and I mean, there's so many ways in which social media and everything can be more and more personalized. I think we see account-based marketing as being a huge kind of trend and something that lots and lots of our clients are looking at and investing in. And I think website personalization can play a big supporting role in that too, in terms of you're targeting either one-to-one or one-to-few, one-to-many, but a certain number of accounts. And when they land on your website from a campaign or a link, you want to start to begin to personalize that experience for them. And so, yeah, I think that's a really interesting area where personalization can, particularly in the B2B space, play a big role. I think personalization has often been something that people have assumed you need a certain volume of traffic in order for it to start to deliver an ROI. And a lot of B2B businesses may have, a few, hundreds of visits, low thousands to their website a month. It's not a consumer site where there's all that data that you can constantly be learning quickly from. And so that's, I think, sometimes been a barrier to B2B personalization. But with the account-based marketing approach, I think it opens up some interesting opportunities.
Yeah, it's actually very interesting to hear that insight because, the way CustomFit.ai is sort of designed is you could flush out a personalized page just in a few minutes, like about 2 to 3 minutes. But having said that, it's interesting to hear from someone like you who's leading an agency that ABM is sort of picking up because we sort of have playbooks at CustomFit on our website, right, for ABM, and we see that there is so much potential for personalization within paid ads, within different website landing pages itself, and also when they have to do competitive, head-on marketing. So things like that. There are multiple use cases, we have discovered, and it's very interesting to. So our earlier guest in the previous interview, he was just mentioning that, and he happens to be the director marketing from Optimove, and he was mentioning that how they work closely with personalization, and they have seen a very different trend wherein the sort of the size of the company is no longer a proportional, or it doesn't completely align with the personalization efforts. It's just about making it happen if you're really concerned about giving the right experience to the customers. So that's a very interesting and sort of evolutionary insight that I am getting from you, one after the other, right after the previous interview. So my next question is, since 93 Digital specializes with WordPress websites, right? So have you experienced or have you dabbled around with any personalization plugins for WordPress? So, and if you have, to what extent have those projects had those tools work for them?
Yeah, so we have a little bit. I think we've experimented. It's interesting because there's the WordPress plugin type solutions which allow you to do personalization from within the content management system. You log into your WordPress site, and within the pages and posts, you can begin to implement rules and do things. And then there's the other category of products where you're just kind of modifying the DOM on top of the screen using JavaScript, and it's not actually stored within the CMS. So there's two kind of different approaches. I think generally, I see the second category being more common because it gives you that kind of quite quick, just modify stuff very quickly on the fly, and it's a separate kind of dashboard and portal as a SaaS solution that kind of sits outside of WordPress, but still modifies things. So two interesting different approaches, each of which has pros and cons. There's a plugin for WordPress called Logic Hop, which we've experimented with a bit, which does things kind of inside WordPress, but I think that's the only one that I've, at least personally, have kind of actively used myself. I'm sure some of the team have done some other things. I know one of our hosting partners, WP Engine, has some kind of basic functionality within the platform which allows you to kind of do bits of personalization in a simple way. You can store kind of session information and think about localization and geographic type targeting. So haven't yet found a solution that's specifically within the WordPress plugins ecosystem, specifically inside the WordPress dashboard, that has kind of, I guess, really taken off.
Awesome. And we have a little question that we typically ask all our guests, which is, if you had to give an advice to your younger self and the existing, next-gen marketers, aspiring marketers, what would that advice be for them?
Oh, that's a good question. I think for marketers that are looking to get started, I think, or kind of in the early stages of their career, I think finding that balance between like level of specialism and generalism as a marketer is an area to think about. I think it's challenging because I see so many job ads posted online where it says you need to be a CRM expert and a HubSpot expert and graphic designer and copywriter, and and the salary is £20,000 and that's it, and we want you to basically run the whole marketing operation with zero experience. And I think fortunately that's getting better with time. But I think for young marketers, focusing on that, where they want to head. And it's difficult when you're at early stages, but I think starting quite general would be my advice, and it allows you to get good visibility of all of the parts of marketing, and then quite soon after becoming a bit more specialist and focused. And I think it's Google have this analogy of the T-shaped person. So you've kind of got this broader awareness of everything that's happening around you, but then you've got this kind of focus around a particular channel or discipline as well. But it definitely takes time. And I think prioritization for me is like probably the biggest skill, particularly in that more generalist marketing role, being able to just spin multiple plates and stay organized and prioritize, which are all ultimately soft skills rather than like hard learning marketing skills. If you've got those soft skills as foundations, then I think you can go a long way as a marketer.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. If there are any signing off notes, we'd love to hear from you.
Nothing in particular. I guess I'm happy to connect with anybody that's listening. I'm sure I'll be on LinkedIn, Alex Price, or my email address is just alex@93digital.co.uk if anyone wants to get in touch.
Great. Thank you, Alex. Thanks a lot for your time. And good for all of us to connect tonight here. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.